What's up, everybody? Welcome to Chaff. This is episode number 54. My name is Zach. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined, as per usual, by my co-host, Ben Fisher. How's it going, dude?
Going pretty well. Now, I just want to pause real quick. There's no fire alarms happening right now, right?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I'll actually add that to my Teferi Tybalt. I have something to add to that. But no, we should be good. With this building, though, it's always hard to tell, so...
I mean, the last several times Zach and I have attempted to do anything podcast related, it seems we can't escape these fire alarms that keep going off. I think he burnt something in his apartment. Is that right?
It wasn't me. I've never burned anything in my entire life except things that I lit on fire. We'll move on.
Cut that one off. So today we've got kind of as Zach named it, a Purgatory Potpourri, because we're in Purgatory between sets right now. We don't really know what's coming up. We don't really, we kind of know what's behind us, but we're kind of in limbo right now. So we've got a few things to chat about. Card evaluation, we're going to talk some spoilers, and some other assorted nonsense. So I think Zach has some things to say before we do that, though.
Yeah, of course. We have our usual housekeeping. If you're not in the Discord, definitely check that out. The link to our Discord server is in the episode description, as well as on our Twitter page. The Discord is completely free, and it's a great place to be to chat all things AFR, as well as any constructed formats we just added due to listener/Discord member request. We added a vintage and a legacy channel as well for the constructed section of our Discord, and we have a ton of different limited formats available as well to discuss. So if you're interested in finding like-minded individuals and discussing different MTG-related things on a regular basis, check out the Discord. Also, the show is brought to you by you, the listener, via Patreon. You can check out the Patreon if you're not already a patron at patreon.com/draftchaffpod. This is what keeps us doing this day in and day out, week in and week out, and we have a bunch of different tiers over there giving you access to things like official Draft Chaff stickers, the full show notes, custom deck building opportunities with us, access to uncut and unedited versions of the show with some pre-show, some post-show nonsense. Thanks to the Patreon, we are also uploading all of our episodes to YouTube, which is great, and we're hoping with our next goal to hit the ability to broadcast live as we record, so that would be awesome. We can have all you folks jump into a live stream of some sort and watch as we go through the show live and in person. And on that note, we also have to shout out Robert, our latest patron. Thank you so much for your support. Really, really happy to have you on board. And really, we can't thank you enough for all of your support. And we're also adding a couple of new things to the Discord, kind of rolling out some new ideas as we get into this, our second year of the show. So definitely look at that on a regular basis. If there's some things you're not seeing there that you'd like to see, the Discord's a great place to give us feedback on that, but that actually segues into my next bit of housekeeping, and that is that we recently sent out a survey to all of our Discord members, our Twitter fans, and if you aren't on either of those channels following us, it was in the episode description of last episode. It'll also be in the episode description of this episode. Check out that survey. It really helps us a lot to shape the show as we're going into the second year to really hit the sweet spots of what we've been trying to do, as well as what you guys are interested in hearing and like us to cover and like us to stop wasting time on, or all these different things. It's really a big help. We've got some feedback rolling in on that already, and it's been a big help, and it actually helped put us onto this episode topic this week. So without further ado, on to our Crack a Draft type thing.
Right, so this week we've got a bit of a unique one. I wasn't really feeling Strixhaven, and there's some sets going around right now. There's the what is it, Chromatic Cube, which is kind of sweet, but I wanted to do something paper. You know, Zach and I were a little spoiled. We got to crack some paper packs over the weekend. I'm kind of feeling like sticking with it. So actually, shout out to some of the Discord members who are organizing a sealed league. I happen to have 6 packs on hand. And look, I know I just can't really resist. Now, by the time this episode comes out, some of you might not even hear this by the time we crack the packs for the sealed league. It's happening on the same day as this episode releases. Those that are listening that are playing the Seal League, you get to find out what's in one of my Zendikar Rising packs, because, I don't know, I haven't cracked one of these in a while. It feels kind of nice. So let's see what ends up being in here.
And to clarify for the league, what we're doing is we're splitting as pseudo-chaos sealed, where we're doing 2 packs from some of the more recent standard legal sets. So you got Zendikar Rising, I think Kaldheim, and Strixhaven.
All right, let's start off this pack. We've got a nice full art plains, of course. That's, always good to have. So we've got Expedition Champion. I'm just going to kind of breeze through these, see if anything sticks out, which I do like in the aggressive red decks. Expedition Champion. Living Tempest, always underwhelming. It did occasionally kill me. Dreadworm, same. Grotag Bugcatcher, my boy. I first picked this card over most rares in the set, and it never does me dirty. Smite the Monstrous, meh, it's fine. Scale the Heights, I believe to be a trap. Zulaport Duelist for you dirty rogues players. Resolute Strike, an embarrassing but serviceable combat trick. Vanquish the Weak, solid removal. Cliffhaven Kite Sail, one of the snap equipments. Pretty good stuff. Skyclave Plunder, the big 5-drop sorcery, lets you scry a bunch, draw cards. Cleric of Lifespawn, the best 2-drop in the black-white life gain deck. We got a Kabira Takedown, and the rare is a Tajuru Paragon. That was the one of the green 3/2 elf that had all party types and had kicker that let you go find more stuff from your party. I don't know. It's looking like a pretty good spread in this pack. I do love a Cleric of Lifespawn. I love a Kabira Takedown. And those would pair okay with the other stuff in here. Nothing sticks out super well in this pack. To be honest, if this was a draft, I would consider the Grotag Bugcatcher. But I'd probably end up taking the Cleric of Lifespawn or the Kabira Takedown.
Yeah, I think Vanquish the Weak is also potentially a pick here. Never really bad to pick up early removal. Not that, if I recall, that was the best, like one of the better removal spells in the format, but it's always serviceable. Bugcatcher's up there for me as well. It was one of the better red 2-drops in the format, but the black-white deck was my favorite deck in the format, and that Cleric is one of the linchpins for it, so I would probably also take that. And Kabira Takedown's a card that you're not really unhappy to take, but you're not really going to see too many of those clerics get past unless you plant your flag in that deck and cut it off early. So yeah, I'm happy to take that here.
Now, as for the Sealed League, oh no, I hope I don't end up in black-white. That'd be such a shame. Man.
Right.
I had shed so many tears about that one. I got Vanquish the Weak, I got a Resolute Strike, I got a Smite, I got a Dreadworm. I guess we'll see how that goes.
All right, on to our Teferi Tibalt. If you're new to the show or haven't heard this before, Teferi Tibalt is kind of our take at Roses and Thorns, where Ben and I kind of highlight a high from our past week and a low from the past week, kind of just give you guys a little insight into what's been going on in our lives. So, Ben, take it away.
Right, so this is my first full week off of school, or was that last week? That was last week? No, that's this week? I suppose that's this week. Oh my God, it feels like a blur, but I'm finally done my first year of teaching, so that's pretty good. It was a lot. I survived though, and now time has no meaning for me until the fall. I'm going to do a lot of sitting around, play a lot of Magic, see some friends I haven't seen in a while. So that's definitely a Teferi. One of those includes Zach. I actually got to see Zach in person over the weekend. We got to crack some MH2. We got to go back and forth destroying each other with MH2 decks. Both of which were totally legitimate decks and definitely not jank that we forced.
Right.
More on that later in the show. But then we got to hang out with some friends that night, and it was an all-around good time. So just kind of getting things done too. I'm moving in, I guess, a month from the recording date, and I'm starting to set up movers and swapping, services and utilities and all that stuff. Just getting things done. Then my Tibalt, oh man. So today, I have spent most of my day at the car repair shop, where I had my car in to get the condenser fixed because my air conditioning didn't work. Now, those of you that are in the United States right now know that we are going through a little bit of a heat wave. Something like, I don't know, it feels over 100 degrees every day outside.
So far this week, that has been the case, yeah? On the East Coast, it's even worse on the West Coast.
Yeah. We've got the humidity over here on the East Coast, so I don't know. I'd prefer the dry heat, but whatever. Things out there are just straight up melting.
Yeah, 105 degrees is 105 degrees. I don't care if it's humid or not. It sucks.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. So driving around with no air conditioning for the last few weeks has sucked too. So it was this whole big process. They had to go contact the claims people, but the claims people weren't like picking up, and then the one person was on hold for a while. It was funny. I got there at 10 a.m. My phone died at 1 p.m. I was playing some Magic, drained my battery out. I was listening to some podcasts, that kind of thing. And it was another while before they ended up coming to get me to say I was done, that they'd finally gotten through the claims and all that good stuff. So it turned out by the time I actually got to my car, it was like nearly 4 p.m. And I didn't even realize it. I thought after my phone died, I thought I was there for like an hour. But I was telling Zach before the show, I think watching Dr. Phil just messes with time in a bizarre way. I think I don't know, something time dilation due to the high velocity of your brain while watching CBS television.
Right.
But it was gross. Not a fun experience. And my phone was dead, so I couldn't even work on the show notes.
Yeah, that's a bummer. That sucks. It's never a good thing to go through like car troubles. It's never fun, but I feel like there's always something extra on top of whatever the normal car trouble you might be having is. It's like either trying to get it fixed is an extra pain for whatever reason. That part that happened to break on your car is only made like twice a year, and they are never going to be able to get it, and all that kind of stuff. So hey, at least you got back and they got it fixed.
It's true. I will say, I did get my revenge. This place had complimentary snacks, and I just wiped them out.
There you go.
Anyway, what's up with you?
Yeah, so for me, this week kind of marks, we're just getting into July, right? We're at the end of June here, and for me, that means that I need to start more seriously looking for a new apartment because my lease, so the lease I have now is technically up in September, but when I signed the lease, we got a couple of free months due to the length of the term that we signed, and so there's a nice little leeway we have where we're likely to be able to get an apartment before we have to move out of our current apartment, but still only pay one rent because we have one of those free months banked up. Mm-hmm. So it'll give us like a month to move, basically, is the goal. So we'll have a lot of time to get things from one apartment to the other, and would be great in that regard. So my Teferi is that apartment hunting is in full swing at the moment. We are looking pretty aggressively at different apartments. I've got one tour set up so far next week, and then I've got a couple more in the works. So hopefully we find something quick and meets all of our, checks all of our boxes and all those sorts of things. Apartment hunting can be pretty rough. My roommate is doing the same thing. Him and his girlfriend are also apartment hunting as we're all splitting and finally moving to different apartments, which is going to be weird because I've lived with my roommate Mark for almost 6 years now.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's going to feel weird. Yeah, it's going to feel weird not to be a room away from him at all times. But should be good. My wife and I are excited to not have roommates. So, but my tibalt is that I'm also apartment hunting. It can be rough, and I can be picky. So, I'm just hoping that we find something quick and don't have to worry about extra moving costs. Like if we have all that extra time to move, then it's unlikely we'll have to hire movers because we can, every couple days just go run stuff over to the place and
convenient.
Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. All right, on to our listener question of the week. And this week, we stumbled a little bit. To pull the curtain back a little bit, we answered all of our previously asked listener questions on last week's show, and I forgot to remind everybody to ask us more for this show. So what we did was we took a little bit of feedback from our survey that we did get a few responses on, and one of those questions was, or actually one of the things that was suggested that we do more frequently was perhaps make either videos or podcast episodes, and maybe both. We'll see, how this is received, but to talk about how we analyze new cards, how we prepare for new formats, things of this nature. Those first couple of weeks getting into a new format where we're still learning a lot about how the environment and the format itself is shaping out. So expect to see some more content on that as AFR comes out. But today we're going to talk a little bit about how we analyze cards and what we do a little bit to prepare at the end of a format going into a new format. So we've got a few different things. That's one of the things we'll be talking about. We'll also be talking about some AFR spoilers and a little bit on Modern Horizons 2. We didn't really spend time on a full episode with that, and neither Ben nor I did really any drafting in that format, so we don't have a whole lot to say, but we did have some fun with the set this past weekend, so we'll talk about that a little bit. Right,
so let's get right into it. How to analyze new cards. We're all seeing spoilers right now, and I want to kind of take a two-pronged approach. First, we're going to start off with the traditional analysis way of analyzing new cards. This is what I'd say 99% of Magic players do. And these are just some heuristics that Zach and I have picked up through, I guess, our experience learning new cards. I personally love pre-release. I know Zach does as well. It's some of our favorite ways to play just because it's such a friendly, low-stakes environment. but also with some competition sprinkled in, which sounds right up our alley. So everyone's learning the cards. If somebody makes a mistake, let them take it back, whatever. But then if you play, the best and know the cards and use your kind of leverage your experience and knowledge of the game, you'll come out on top. And who doesn't like winning? So it's a good place to have fun and also maybe score some packs or store credit or something like that. So to get you all prepared for potentially some in-person pre-release events for this set, we want to talk about a few ways to analyze these new cards that are coming out. So first up, the card by itself. So if you see a new card, you're like, whoa, what's this? Let me read it. Just read it. See what is immediately noteworthy about the card just by itself in a vacuum, nothing else compared to it. Sometimes mythics and alternate win cons can grab your attention and just scream, I'm playable, I'm game winning. Think Questing Beast. I don't think anyone was debating whether or not it would be, playable when it was first printed, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody finished reading the card before it was printed, between spoiler season and when they actually got it in their hands. But yeah, some cards really do just scream out at you and say, like, I'm above rate, I'm giving you more than what you're paying for in this case. And Questing Beast is a perfect example of that. 4 mana for all the text in the world and also a body that you're not upset with. It's like what you're expecting and then upside and upside and upside and upside. So those are the kind of things and as Ben mentioned, are typically found on mythics or these sort of build around-y sort of alternate win con type cards where they're pretty in your face about how powerful they are in most situations. Sometimes those alternate win cons can have little caveats to them, but a lot of the big flashy bomb mythic rares they're going to let you know that they're playable.
Yeah, so unless the context of the set is just very bizarre, usually if you see something Baneslayer-esque, you can say, okay, this is probably going to be pretty good. Good to keep that in the back of my head. If my opponent plays one in game 1, maybe consider saving removal for it in game 2, that type of thing. Just know that there are bombs in the set and those are going to be there. So the second kind of level up, that was the card by itself. Well, how about compared to similar cards? You can see a card and say, well, is this card similar to anything that I already know about? Is it a combination of several existing cards? So Saffron Olive does a great job of this in his spoiler discussion videos. Whenever there's a new Planeswalker spoiled, what he does is specifically looks at each loyalty ability and compares it to a card to kind of gauge the mana worth of that card. So for example, if a Planeswalker has like a -2 that makes 2 1/1 tokens, you'd say, oh, well, that's like Raise the Alarm. Raise the Alarm is usually worth around 2 mana. Let's see how good that really is, or something like that. So that's one way of analyzing these new cards. For example, if you see a creature, you could go and compare it to other similar creatures. There's a new white dragon, the name of which I don't even remember yet. It's like
Icing Death, yeah.
Yeah, Icing Death? Tasty.
Yeah.
Icing Death. It's a 4. It's 2 white for a 4/3 with flying and vigilance, and then it has some nonsense about dying into an equipment or whatever. But there are other creatures with that stat, right? There's thinking way back. There was Gisela, Blade of Gold Knight. Yes. Or no, hold on. That's the good one. I'm talking about the Eldrazi-fied one. It was a 4 mana 4/3 with flying. I think that one had lifelink and first strike rather than vigilance, but it was a solid playable. Any kind of 4 mana 4 power flyer is going to be pretty good. Another more recent one is Legion Angel, of course, from ZNR, which has spent quite a bit of time in my sideboards. I love playing that in my mono white standard decks. So I don't know, if you see a card with some stats, think about how it compares to other similar cards, especially when you're talking about the common limited archetypes. So for example, the white combat trick or the common blue counterspell with the ability of the set tacked on. Think about how good those tend to be, and then think about, well, does this seem better or worse than, say, I don't know, straight up dissolve or something like that?
Right, and at the moment, we're looking at individual cards, comparing them to other individual cards from previous formats. And we've talked about this on the show a few times. We've seen recently that they've been, WotC's been very, very ready to print a cheap creature in blue that has flash, and when it ETBs, it gives -1 or -2 power to some creature. Right? We had Burrog Befuddler, we had Zulaport Duelist, there was one in Kaldheim, which the name escapes me at the moment. but we've had them. Like that's been something we've seen pretty much every set for the last year. And so I'm expecting we'll probably see one like that in AFR as well. And so you can kind of think that you can take that and move it a step further. And instead of just looking at those cards in a vacuum, when you see a card that fits an archetype that you are familiar with, something that is like, oh, this is as Ben mentioned, maybe the blue common counterspell for this set. It's something that we see a lot and we're used to seeing them. How good was this the last time I saw it? And then you can kind of take the format that you found it into context and say, well, it was good in this particular format. And why was it good there? Well, that format was really slow, so counterspells were actually pretty decent. Okay, is this now, as I'm seeing new cards come out for this new format, as they're being spoiled, kind of take stock and think, is this shaping up to be a slower format? Maybe this counterspell will actually be decent. And you can kind of adjust your card evaluations that way as well by taking old format knowledge and trying to apply it to the new format as you see all these new cards coming out.
Right. So the next thing you can do is analyze the card within the context of the set. So how will this card fare in the limited meta of this specific set? It's a good idea to see how power and toughness align, because this requires you to know the meta of the set, which is really hard to gauge before actually playing it. Sometimes you can get hints, though, just from looking at the cards. So I like to look at power and toughness of creatures. Just straight up looking at what the power and toughness are of cards in the set and seeing what it tends to be. If every single card in the set has higher power than toughness, it might be kind of aggressive. Things might want to be attacking. These cards might be at best when they're attacking. If everything has more toughness than power, well, then these cards might be best when they are being defensive, and you might have to find other ways to leverage to get in damage or win the game. So, for example, in Ixalan, Sun-Crested Terran, that was the 5-mana 2/5 flyer, and it had Vigilance if you had another dinosaur. It could block nearly every creature in the format, and most of them it would eat. So this led to the entire archetype of blue-white kind of being dedicated to big butts, controlling the board, preventing you from dying, and then eventually drawing into your finisher, whatever it was. So by looking for similar stats to that, we could kind of gauge, well, maybe this format would also allow me to do something similar. And spoiler alert, I'm kind of seeing that. More on that later when we talk about specific cards. But another way that you can do this is with 2-drops. The 2-drops in a format are pretty important to see, well, is this format full of 2-drops that are going to kill me in 3 turns? Or are the 2-drops kind of just 2-mana 2/2s? So, for example, in Amonkhet, I would bet good money that the average power of 2-drops attacking on turn 3 was usually above 2. Like, on average, their power was probably, 2.2 or something like that. But then in some slower sets, maybe, I don't know, Kaldheim, I would wager that the average attacking 2-drop had closer to under 2 power. I don't know. I'm running some numbers in my head. I'd have to actually crunch these to find out. But I have a funny feeling that this set, I don't know. Without knowing all the 2-drops yet, it's hard to say. But once they come out, maybe we can start looking at that. A set with a lot of like 2-mana 3/1s will tend to be a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of leads into sort of what you're talking about with higher power versus higher toughness, things like that. But 2-drops are so pivotal because of that timing aspect. Turn 2 is very important in limited games. If you are seeing tons of powerful 2-drops come down that are going to hurt you really quickly, and you don't have good 2-drops that are going to defend, you're going to start taking a lot of damage really quickly, and you'll be on the back foot much faster than in a format where your 2-drops are kind of heavier on the backside and not really getting in the red zone too often.
Mm-hmm. Thinking back to Dominaria, a lot of the red 2-drops were jokes, and you could reasonably, without red there to kind of be the fun police, from the games that I remember of Dominaria, you could often start your curve on turn 3 without worrying too much, and sometimes you were starting your curve with like a vanilla 2/3 or something. Shout out to you, what was it, Tolarian Wizard, Tolarian Scholar, something like that. But so once you know the set's context, then you can start to analyze the cards a little better. Now, just one little note, you should also analyze the card within the context of the format if you're interested in Constructed. This doesn't matter too much for Limited, but right now a good example of that is, does this new card pass the Bone Crusher test? Does it have 2 toughness? And God, they printed like a mythic 5/2 dragon with all these other abilities, and all I'm thinking is like, that thing dies to Bone Crusher, doesn't it? Eldraine doesn't rotate out with this set release, does it?
It does.
Oh, it does? Oh, thank
Fairly
God. We're
certain
good.
it does.
Okay.
I'm not a big
Never mind
constructed
then.
player, but I'm fairly certain it's rotating. Yeah.
I'll be honest, I haven't touched standard in weeks. I think today was the first time I wanted to. Limited has just been so good recently. I've been just wanting to come back to Strixhaven or this new cube or Dominaria flashback. I haven't really wanted to just jam a bunch of dumb adventure creatures. Look, it was fun for a while. I played my fair share of Teamer Clover, but that was like 2 years ago. I got sick of it back then. I'm ready for rotation, and I'm honestly pretty excited to see what comes next for standard. But anyway, that's just a little small note. Think about what the most played spells in standard are, or modern, or whatever format you're interested in, and see how the cards fare against those most played spells.
Yeah, there are also a few other things you can do to kind of ease into learning a new set. One thing that's very important early on is to learn what things your opponents can be doing at instant speed, learn the combat tricks, learn what cards have flash. These things will save you big time in games early on in the format when your opponents aren't already memorizing those things. So, maybe it's keeping up a list. There's usually, and I honestly can't remember the user who tends to post these, but there is an individual, at least on Reddit and Twitter, who tends to post all-in-one graphics of like the instant speed threats, whether they're flash or combat tricks or counter spells even. Also learn all the common removal spells. And when you say common specifically, because those are obviously the most common ones that you'll run into, but it doesn't hurt to know all the uncommon ones in rares as well. But definitely learn the commons. Those will help a lot. And also take advantage of the time spacing between spoilers. They only release so many cards a day, so take advantage of that to learn the cards themselves as they're coming in small chunks rather than waiting until the full set's out. Sometimes that can be a little overwhelming to try to learn the entire set at one time, so maybe take advantage of that spacing.
Right, now on to the second method of card analysis, vector theory. I gotta shout out vector theory here. It is I want to say becoming our thing, and I'm excited to get back into it. So I think this is what I said before, 99% of players would use the other way. I think now naming this vector theory, we can spearhead the 1% that are gonna do this. Well, it's nice to be part of the 1% for once. So I'd say something that I'm going to start doing now that we have vector theory and we have these new cards. As they've been spoiled, I've been asking myself, what is this card's vector? So when this card is at its best, when this card is broken, when you're playing this and you feel like you're getting away with something, what does your deck look like? What does your board state look like to make best use of this? What direction is it? And then, of course, how good is it in that direction? So let's take a look at a few of the spoilers that we've seen so far. First of all, I want to take a look at Shesra Death's Whisper. This is 2 black-green for a 1/3. It's a legendary human elf warlock. So what's that, a half-elf?
Half-elf, yeah.
Zach knows much more about D&D than I do, so he's going to be spearheading the Flavor Town for this go-around, I think.
I'm excited.
Now, this isn't uncommon, so it looks like we're getting another set full of uncommon legends, which, honestly, this has been a good change. I've liked that they've been doing this, printing these signpost uncommon legends. Fun for Commander, fun for Brawl, I suppose, and fun for gameplay. So this is a 4-mana 1/3, and it's a legend. So already I'm a little bit scared, but let's read it out. So it has Bewitching Whispers, which this is italicized text, but that's just for flavor, it seems.
Yeah, essentially what they're doing in AFR is anytime a creature or an artifact or an enchantment, or basically any spell at all in the entire format, has some sort of ability, they're giving them names to kind of more or less say rather than show the flavor of the ability they're trying to get off. So in this case, yeah, Bewitching Whispers is sort of that italicized flavor name for the ability, which I kind of like because it lets you shortcut, what you're saying. If you're like playing in paper, you can say like, these aren't activated actually. So on this card, it's kind of not a great example of that, but there are some that have activated abilities that are, there are a couple of instances that are modal that, you choose one of the two options, and it'll be really nice to be able to say like, oh, I open the left door, and like your opponent knows what you're talking about, and that's like the ability.
Right. So are these like D&D spells? Like, is Bewitching Whispers an actual spell from D&D?
As far as I know, Bewitching Whispers is not, but a lot of them in the format, like a lot of the words they've decided to use as names are spells or otherwise actions that like a player might take with their character or something. Yeah.
Yeah, that's sick. So Bewitching Whispers, when Shesra Death's Whisper enters the battlefield, target creature blocks this turn if able. And then she also has Whispers of the Grave. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, you may pay 2 life. If you do, draw a card. Sweet.
Yeah,
so let's think
great.
about the ideal way to play this. I'm thinking you want to curve out something like a 3 mana 3/3 into this. So you have your 3 mana 3/3, you untap, you play Shesra, you attack, you say maybe target their like 3-drop, maybe it's a 2/3 or something. They're forced to block your 3 mana 3/3, and then you pay 2 life and draw a card. See, you kind of destroyed one of your opponent's creatures. Granted, you do have to pair this with a larger creature in order for that to happen, but in that way, it's kind of like a Ravenous Chupacabra.
A little bit. It's a build your own Ravenous Chupacabra, sure.
Right. And then you can pay 2 life and draw a card. And then that's not just this turn, that's any turn. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, you may pay 2 life if you do draw a card. You can't do that forever. You might want some life gain to offset that. But what kind of deck would you want to have this in?
Yeah, so also one more thing to just kind of note about that Whispers of the Grave ability. It is anytime a creature, it's at your end step, but it's if a creature died, so it's opponent's creatures or your own. Nice little bit of insurance, I guess, if you happen to get a block in, like you mentioned, maybe a 2/3 blocking a 3/3, and they happen to have a pump spell, and your creature dies, you're at least still given the ability to pay that life and draw the card. So that's pretty nice. And anytime your opponent's using like sacrifice effects or something like that, you can still take advantage of that. Your own sacrifice effects you can take advantage of. So that's part of where I'd see this deck. Maybe if there is some sort of sacrifice reanimate kind of sub theme, it'd be kind of cool to be able to slide this in there. I would like to see if this green-black color pair has any amount of readily available Death Touchers, because that pairs really well with her top ability.
Yeah.
Any kind of big creatures that are cheap but maybe have other downsides or something that we can leverage that top ability for. Anything that lets us make sure that we are getting a creature dead with her top ability is where I'm looking to see this. So I'm feeling it's probably a slightly aggressive build, the Golgari, in some respects, because we want those bigger creatures early, or they're going to be a lot of Death Touch.
Death Touch would be sick.
Yeah, so probably mid-rangey, because 3 power for 3 mana is pretty much what you expect to see. So we're going to see, I would expect probably some mid-rangey stuff and hopefully some reanimator stuff.
Agreed. I think this card screams Cab's theory, cards that affect the board state, right? Although it does pair kind of well with combat tricks, given that, I don't know, if your opponent knows this is coming, they might leave a blocker back to be ready, and then you can kind of get them with this. So seems cool to me. Next up, Air Cult Elemental. This is 4 blue for a 2/5 flying elemental. It is Whirlwind. When Air Cult Elemental enters the battlefield, return up to 1 other target creature to its owner's hand. It's a pretty big mana war, but it does not pass the vanilla test.
No, not at all. 6 mana for a 2/5 flyer is, not really where you want to be. It's nice that it attaches that little bit of tempo. You do get to bounce things. You also can bounce your own stuff if you have enter the battlefield effects to rebuy, so maybe there's some form of weird baby blink or something going on. I would doubt that that's actually where they're headed with this, but that's an option. It is a common, so I wouldn't expect a card like this to be terribly powerful. 2/5 does tell me that we're going to be able to be blocking some things pretty readily, and it is a flyer, which is big. Like having a big butt flyer in the air is great to keep you from dying against any aggressive flyers. This kind of is that Pterodon you were mentioning, but it is more expensive and doesn't have quite the same abilities in effect. But maybe this will matter. I mean, the tempo could be huge. So this seems like it's going to want to be in a control deck that's doing its slow thing. Maybe a green-blue deck that can ramp to get it out a little earlier than turn 6. I won't expect to see this though in many decks. It doesn't seem that great, but the tempo is tempo, and I just think 6 mana is a little much for this.
Yeah, 6 mana is quite a bit, but if the format happens to be slow enough, then this might be just the stabilizer you need. I mean, I can imagine a lot of board states where this would just come down and immediately stabilize you. Right? Like maybe bounce their 1 4/4 flyer, and then they're left like a 2/2 flyer and some ground creatures that you already had locked up. This is really good at keeping you alive. So this pairs with other things that would extend you into the late game. Maybe if you're trying to get through that one last dungeon and you really need the 4/4 at the end. This will buy you at least a turn, if not more. So it is expensive. I do think this is probably going to be pretty good, though, if the format happens to be slow enough. I guess we'll come back to that and see how it is. But look, Mana War is a good card. adding a mana war onto a huge flying body. It's something to keep an eye out for. Next card is Shortcut Seeker. This is 3 and a blue. It is a 2/5 human rogue. Whenever Shortcut Seeker deals combat damage to a player, venture into the dungeon.
Yeah, so venture into the dungeon is a new ability, I want to say. It's a new bit of rules text that enables you to enter the first room or advance to the next room of a dungeon. If you're not familiar with dungeons, we aren't covering them quite in this show, but definitely look to our format breakdown in I think next week, where we will kind of break down more about what those are. It's a valuable ability from what we've seen. Hard to tell how much, kind of to use that saffron olive sort of telemetry that you were mentioning. Hard to tell how much to value this at from a mana perspective, because the first room of every available dungeon is like either gain 1 life, or your opponent loses 1 life, or you scry 1, I think were the 3 options.
Mm-hmm.
So the first venture into the dungeon card you can read as either one of those 3 things, which isn't amazing. I mean, this is a 4 mana 2/5, which is doing the air cult elemental thing pretty well. I mean, it's going to stabilize you, and this is much more where I'd want to see the mana cost on a card like this. It's a body that's going to come down early enough to be relevant. Not having flying might be a problem, so we'll see. But venturing into the dungeon, and it's weird because this is a card where, and we've seen them do this a lot. Like, designers for Magic cards tend to do this frequently, but it's a card that's defensively statted that wants to be attacking, because its effect only triggers when it deals combat damage to a player. That makes me a little nervous. I would look for ways to maybe try to force this through, but most of the time I expect this is not going to be doing the thing, right? This is going to be a 2/5 that sits back and blocks most of the time.
Yeah, it is a good blocker. I can imagine a board with like a few of these on either side, and people just waiting for things to happen. So I guess this is where we have to turn a little bit to set context. I noticed an unblockable theme in blue. Mm-hmm. I think I saw 2 or 3 cards that involve not being able to block a certain creature. So who knows? Who knows how this will end up faring with that. Now, like you mentioned, this card does want to deal combat damage to players, but that means your 4-drop is getting in for 2 damage.
Right.
So it's a little strange. Like, you're going to be getting to do the dungeon thing in that case, rather than killing him with damage. If this is just a 4 mana 4/4, you would just straight up kill your opponent, right? Long before you get to do any kind of dungeon stuff. But who knows? Maybe it sounds like blue wants to be doing the dungeon thing, venturing over and over again, maybe multiple times each turn. If you can give this unblockable somehow, or evasion repeatedly, this is a way to kind of sweep through a dungeon pretty reliably. And it is, you take a little bit of risk while blocking this. If you put, say, like a bunch of blockers in front of it to try to like double block it down, you're opening yourself up for a combat trick. Right? So this thing does pair well with combat tricks, because people will either try to block it with like their own 2/4, and then you can pump and take out their creature, or they might try to go for like a mass block, like I said, and then try to trade for it, in which case you can maybe get a nice 2-for-1 or even better. So I don't know. I think this is indicative of a slightly slower format. Just look at these 3 cards that I happen to pick: 1/3, 2/5, 2/5. Now this last one is a bit of a departure from that. This is Targ-nar, Demon Fang Gnoll. What exactly is a gnoll? Is it a gnome troll? Because
no,
that's kind of what it looks like.
Gnolls are a sort of, you can think of them like almost werewolves, in that they're big, hairy, bipedal, sort of 4-legged. I mean, they have arms, but they run on 4 legs sometimes. They're goblin-esque, like big hairy hobgoblins or something. It's a terrible explanation of them, but that's the best approximation I can give you without actually memorizing like background information on them.
Fair enough. But this is red-green for a 2/2 legendary creature. It's a gnoll. It has Pack Tactics, which I have noticed does show up multiple times on other cards, and I think it all has similar effects. Whenever Targ-nar Demon Fang Gnoll attacks, if you attack with creatures with total power 6 or greater this combat, that's like the Pack Tactics text from what I noticed. Yes. Attacking creatures get +1/+0 until end of turn. And it also has 2 red-green as an activated ability, double Targ-nar's power and toughness until end of turn. This is a pretty nice 2-drop, but it still attacks as a 2-drop for the first several turns of the game. At least the first turn. On turn 3 you attack with it, probably on turn 4 as well, and then maybe turn 5 it's attacking with greater than 2 power. I mean, you do have that activated ability, which does prevent blocks, which means it's probably going to be getting in. But again, this is just going to be getting in for 2 the first several turns. Compare this to like, I don't know, Gustwalker from back in Amonkhet. That was the, what was it? Let me see here. 2 mana, 2/1. And when you exert it, which means you tap and it doesn't untap in your next untap step, it gets +1/+2 and gains flying until end of turn. So this was kind of like a 2 mana, 2 power creature that when you needed it to be, it was a 3 power creature. And that was, pretty common. It turned out just being able to get that evasion was really important, and having that 3rd power was crucial for ending the game against people that might be trying to stabilize. This thing, it doesn't have that ability to buff itself right away, and having it be an activated ability is much weaker. So if you just told me I wanted to play a straight up aggressive limited deck, I would take the one with a bunch of Gustwalkers over the one with a bunch of Targnars, right? Given the context of this format, it seems like, look how this matches up against Shortcut Seeker. Not great, right?
Yeah, well, so when I read this card, and to kind of go back to the way we evaluate cards, my first thought was Reckless Amplemancer. That's the most recent version of a similar effect we've seen, right? That was I believe that was a 2 mana 2/2 that you could pay 4 mana to pump it. Double its, it was 5.
Thing.
Double its power and toughness. Now this Targnar, imagine you play Targnar on 2. You're probably playing another creature on 3, and then on 4, maybe you want to pump Targnar. But I just played a Shortcut Seeker. Even if you pump the Targnar, it's not going to kill the Shortcut Seeker unless you happen to have another creature around to get the Pack Tactics trigger.
Right.
So that feels kind of bad, but it is getting a lot of steam, I guess, out of your 2-drop. Like, you're getting a decent amount of value out of your 2-drop, though by then you've invested 6 mana and you're only dealing with my 4-drop. So that doesn't feel great.
Yeah, this feels like it would be best. Well, let's again consider its vector. This really wants to hit that power 6 as fast as possible for that Lord ability, which is definitely strong. That's pretty powerful, and it could be even better when combined with stuff like pump spells or larger, beefier creatures. But I'm starting to dig into the vector analysis of the set at this point. Seems like a lot of these cards want to be going a little slower. So it'll depend on just what kind of support this thing can get, if it can get this pack that it seems to want in order to really get in there and close out the game quick before people start doing these busted dungeon things. I mean, this thing, I don't know too much about Knowles, but it doesn't look very interested in exploration or, I don't know, discovering ancient artifacts. It looks like it's going to kill me.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty typical for Knowles. It's also worth mentioning these Pack Tactics cards do really well together. Anytime you're doing a lot of them, I should say, from what we still haven't seen probably even half the set yet, so take this with a grain of salt. We'll talk about it more in our format breakdown. But it seems that a lot of these Pack Tactics cards do things globally. They hit all of your creatures when they trigger their effect. So if you have another Pack Tactics creature that's giving, like, I don't know, some form of evasion, or maybe another +1/+0, maybe trample, something like that, you're suddenly turning on your whole board pretty quickly, and that's going to be a great way to kind of do the, it kind of reminds me a little bit of some of the Lorehold decks we've seen, where they hit you like maybe for 2 or 3 damage over the course of the first 4 turns, and then suddenly their Lumimancer is like a 20/20, and you're like, oh, I'm dead.
Yeah, you could even play 2 Targnars and then get both.
Nope, can't do that. It's legendary.
Yeah, you should try it. Anyway, funnily enough, if you play a Tarask, that will trigger Pack Tactics, right?
It's true. It will do that, yeah.
I don't know if it's that much better than Targnar, though.
Well, we'll get to that when we get to that.
Well, that's right now. Let's talk about it. So anyway, just wrapping it up, use vectors as you start to see these new cards. Think about what these cards have their best home in, and post about it in the Discord. The spoiler channel is firing on full cylinders right now. Anyway, we next wanted to talk about some of our other favorite spoilers from the set. So let's just kind of bounce around. What are some things that you like from the set so far?
Definitely have been enjoying the way they handled the flavor of a lot of the creatures. It's a mixed bag for me, because there are a lot of creatures that I was like, oh, they hit the nail on the head with this one, and there are a lot where I was like, this is underwhelming, or this is different than I expected. I will say hats off for the dragon cycle. Every color gets a dragon, and in D&D, there is a cycle of 2 different types of dragons. There are chromatic dragons, which are based on a particular color, and then there are metallic dragons, which are based on a metal, and each of the chromatic and metallic dragons have counterparts. The chromatic dragons are typically evil aligned, whereas the metallic dragons are typically good aligned. In any case,
Weird.
I think from what I've seen, they're all the chromatics so far have been dragons. They've been flying 4/4s, but they also all have an effect. And in D&D, each dragon has a specific type of breath weapon. So the green dragons, for instance, have poison breath. Black dragons have an acid breath. Red dragons have a fire breath. Things like that. So they've given some names to the abilities to kind of make those make sense within the context of Magic. For instance, the green dragon here is a 6 mana 4/4 flyer with poison breath, which says when green dragon enters the battlefield until end of turn, whenever a creature an opponent controls is dealt damage, destroy it. So that feels pretty poisony. You know, you're hitting it with the thing and then it dies after the fact. Like that feels like it hits home. I kind of like that they're naming all the creatures just the name of the creature. They didn't try to like give it a weird different name. It's like this card is just called Green Dragon, which I think makes a lot of sense, and I kind of like that. Where I don't like this as like a flavor thing is what they've done with a lot of instants and sorceries. What they've done is the names of the cards reflect a bit of exposition that your DM might give you.
You're not a fan of that?
I don't like it because I like it from like their attempt to do it, right? I like that they tried. My problem is it feels weird in the context of I'm casting this spell and I'm targeting this thing with it. Normally we would say, I'm going to Doomblade that creature, right?
Yeah.
In this case, I have to say, I'm going to, you found the villain's lair, this creature.
Oh my.
And that
feels grammar police.
that it just feels weird, and I don't like that. But I do like that they tried and they actually found a way to get that part of the game, that part of D&D into Magic, because that is a huge part of D&D. Like the DM's instructions and exposition and storytelling and everything is huge. Those cards also all have choices on them, which feels awesome. Like almost all of them are modals, because it's like you've gotten to this point. Now, what are you going to do? And that's usually how DMing works. It's like you tell the characters this is where you find yourselves. Now what? Like you determine what your character does and how you're going to affect the story from here on out. So I do really like that. I just think that it feels weird within the context of Magic for the naming conventions.
I think it's pretty silly. It's pretty fun. They've been doing this for a little bit. Think to Eldraine, where they had So Tiny and they had Didn't Say Please, which I thought were just pretty comedic inclusions.
Sure, but in those instances, right? I can say now your creature's so tiny, or no, you didn't say please. Like those kind of work. I feel like if just saying like you found the villain's lair, maybe it'll work. Maybe once we see the rest of the set, it'll actually make sense and it'll work. And when I know the effects of the cards better, it's gonna actually work. But I don't know. When I read them at first, I was like, that feels weird.
Save it for Flavor Town, dude. I think it'll be fine. But yeah, I like the Green Dragon a lot. That's one that I put in as one of my favorites. So I didn't know that. So let me get this straight. The color aligned dragons are all just evil. Yeah. But then the metallic ones, which I don't think would they be considered like artifact creatures, or are they still like creatures?
No, they're still creatures. They just have scales that resemble a metal in color.
Oh. Interesting. I know we saw the adult gold dragon, Indeed. Which has been a pretty interesting one. In fact, one of my tweets about it is taken off.
I haven't seen that.
It was a reply to one of Saffron Olive's, but
I did see that. I didn't realize that it took off.
Yeah, it's moderately. I'm basically famous. I gotta go. Actually, I gotta something about. They want me to like put my handprint on like the Hollywood Walk of Fame or something like that. I don't know. Sure. But for getting them 30 likes on a tweet about a Magic card. Anyway, that was that one. 3 red white for a 4/3 flying vigilance haste. Oh no, sorry, flying lifelink haste.
I believe that's the case. Yes.
Cool card, but I mean, it's a 5 mana creature that dies to bolt similar abilities. I guess rip apart.
Yeah, it's a little underwhelming. That's another. So this kind of segues into something I mentioned. Some parts of the flavor aspects of D&D that they brought to the game that I really like. That card kind of starts to segue into an area that I don't like, and that is there is a bit of a problem with Magic in that, as it pertains to correlating with D&D, in that there are a lot of ways that the game can be unbalanced in MTG. if you make a creature too high power, or you give it too many abilities, it either has to be ridiculously expensive so it is fair to be casted when it can be casted, or it's incredibly overpowered and shouldn't be printed, right?
Mm-hmm.
In D&D, there's no such power gap ceiling sort of situation. There's no such balancing act. If you're too weak to fight a thing, you have to go get more powerful before you can go fight the thing. And that means you divert the story in some way, shape, or form. Maybe your characters come close to dying. Some characters might actually die when they fight this thing, and then maybe the villain takes off and does some other thing. In the context of D&D, dragons are some of the more powerful entities. They're definitely defeatable by adventuring parties, but gold dragons in particular are among the most powerful of them. And one way that D&D differentiates power level between dragons in particular is age. You'll have like a regular green dragon, and then you'll have also a young green dragon, or a whelp green dragon, or something like that, or an adult green dragon, or an ancient green dragon. And that kind of gives, a way to kind of specify the power level of these things. So an adult an adult gold dragon should be more powerful than a green dragon. Like, it just should, and it's not really in this case.
Interesting. So you would like to see like all the adult dragons be a bit better than all the conventional dragons, and then I assume we'll be getting some babies or something like that. Those should all be smaller than the normal ones.
Yeah, I mean that would make sense. That's at least how it is in D&D. So I would have expected them to translate that well. Maybe we'll find out that's the case, and the adult gold dragon actually is better, but it just doesn't feel like it's going to be, and that's a little bothersome. And the card that I saw first that kind of tipped me off to this potentially being a problem for this set for those who are diehard D&D fans, and I wouldn't call myself that, but I do quite enjoy the game. The Tarrasque. Tarrasque is a creature in D&D that has a lot of power. It's not necessarily the most like overwhelming or like completely ridiculous creature in the game. There are certainly more intelligent things that you can fight, but it's a big dumb. I mean, it's not actually dumb. It's by D&D standards, it is still quite smart of a creature, but it has a ton of abilities that involve like being able to deal double damage to structures, being able to swallow players, negating magic, which they fit into this card a bit. They did let it fight creatures when it attacks, so you kind of get the double damage aspect in. It does have ward if you cast it, so it can kind of block magic effects in some way, shape, or form. It's a big creature. It's a 10/10, so by magic standards, it is a big creature, but it feels really underwhelming. So it's not necessarily that they translated it poorly. It just feels underwhelming for a creature that's like near the epitome of like things that adventuring parties can take down within the scope of a campaign. So I don't know. I just feel like they could have done better, and that feels bad. And like one card that I really like from a Magic perspective, but again kind of don't like from a D&D perspective, is Dragon Turtle. Dragon Turtles are also creatures that are supposed to be relatively difficult to take down, very intelligent, large. You can see even in the art of that card, it's far bigger than the ship that it's attacking overall. Like think like lion turtles from Avatar. Like, they're massive, very intelligent beings. A lot of dragon turtles are very greedy, so they attack ships pretty frequently. But this is a 3-mana 3/5, which in Magic terms is like, what the heck, a 3-mana 3/5. This one also has flash, and it has a cool ability in that it taps itself and another creature, and they don't untap. So it's like kind of giving you a drawback because you're thinking 3-mana 3/5. It has to have some kind of downside. And it's got flash, so that's an upside. So it's got to have some downside. And I like the way they've designed this from a Magic perspective, but it doesn't feel like a Dragon Turtle to me.
Yeah, like I said, I'm no D&D expert. These designs feel fine to me, but I can definitely see why a lot of them are not quite measuring up. I guess that they really had to include a lot of these bigger, more fantastical things, and somewhere along their gradient of like not powerful to powerful, they wanted to include more D&D powerful things. Then probably some of those had to get scaled down relatively into the Magic mid-power zone to be able to be included at all. Otherwise, everything would just be like random peasants and adventurers running around, and then a few mythic dragons up at the top. So from the non-expert perspective, I'd say it's fine, but I don't know. From what I've heard about the Tarrasque, it's like an Eldrazi level threat, and this thing, I don't know, it dies to a 1/1 death touch.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem. Like, I don't know that I would say it's necessarily an Eldrazi level threat, but it's extremely powerful, and like a level 1 player character is not able to take down. Even a party of level 1 player characters can't take down a Tarrasque. A party of level 8 or 9 player characters generally can't take down a Tarrasque. And for those who aren't familiar, 8 or 9 is kind of like the mid to late point of a lot of campaigns. Like you max out at level 20, but it's a lot of campaigns don't make it to level 20. By level 9 or 10, you're like starting to hit some pretty. You're starting to hit your stride as far as your character's power level, and like a lot of player like adventuring parties can't take down a Tarrasque at that point. So the fact that this dies to like silly stuff, like you said, kind of feels awful.
Well, anyway, on to some of the more uplifting things. It looks like they brought back equipment, specifically red white equipment. Some of them we've seen don't have the snap attachment, but some of them it seems that they do. When they ETB, they attach to a creature, which I really loved from Zendikar Rising. So we've got Dueling Rapier. It's a 1 red mana, just 1 red. It's an equipment. It has flash. When it enters the battlefield, attached to target creature you control. The equipped creature gets +2/+0, and it has equip 4. Sweet.
Yeah, seems pretty solid. That's another aspect that there's like some really cool things and some really not so cool things. This one is a Dueling Rapier. The effect is great from a Magic perspective. Like a 1 mana combat trick that sticks around is pretty great. But then you see a card. There's a card called +2. I think it's +2 Mace.
Yeah.
And in D&D, a +2 weapon is a huge upgrade. In Magic, it gives your creature +2/+2, which is like, sure, I guess. So
yeah, right, like, not everything will translate perfectly.
It's just unfortunate because I feel like they took liberties with cards they shouldn't have, like the Dueling Rapier. Like just a plain rapier in D&D isn't all that amazing. I don't know how you make this much worse to give it the effect to make the +2 Mace feel better. But I think they took strength liberties with cards they shouldn't have, and then had to dial it back on other cards they shouldn't have. I don't know.
Let's talk about Treasure Chest. So this is a 3 mana artifact that I just think is the funniest thing.
Yeah.
So you pay 4, sacrifice Treasure Chest, roll a d20. So we've got a whole bunch of things going on here. First of all, Treasure Chest, I assume those are all over the place in D&D, right?
I mean, that's the game, right? The whole premise of D&D is you're going through this story, you've got a party of characters who are up to shenanigans, and you're doing things for maybe your town that you walk through or whatever. But at the end of the day, you want some loot. Like that's what you're after. You want some money, you want some loot. So yeah, I mean the treasure chests are all over the place.
Now we've got a D20, and I saw this caused a whole controversy on Magic Twitter too. D20s come in a few different types. They come in the randomized ones, which I think D&D players tend to use, and then they come in the spin down form, which Magic gives out during pre-release kits and that kind of thing. And I heard for this one they're actually giving out non-spin down ones in kits, the normal ones. People will say that, I don't know, if you're like good, you can get a spin down to roll a certain way, or that because of the indentations in the sides, they're perfectly weighted. But I saw other people saying that only casinos have perfectly exactly weighted dice, so it doesn't actually matter too much. I don't know. I've always just used my spin downs as like a rolling thing if I needed it for whatever purpose, right?
Yeah, so I actually saw a post by Frank Karsten discussing this.
Oh boy, brought in the big guns.
Exactly. He is one who I will take his word to the bank when it comes to probabilities and statistical outcomes.
True.
What he said was that the spin down D20s are not statistically significantly weighted in any other way. Like, to start off, D20s are not like weighted from the factor. Obviously, they have a weight to them, but they are not intentionally weighted in any capacity. They're made out of resin. However the resin is weighted is how they're weighted. Most companies, maybe like commercial companies that make them do weight them in a certain way, but like there are plenty of people who make their own dice. Those are not weighted in any particular fashion. The D20s we're getting in typical pre-release sets, not weighted in any particular fashion. The difference is the numbers are in sequential order rather than randomized around the die. Long story short, Frank Carson said that a spin down D20 isn't significantly different if you actually roll it. A lot of folks will just drop a die, a D20 when playing D&D, and because the numbers on it are actually randomized, it is still a relatively random outcome. Whereas with a spin down, if you just drop the die, there's a far greater chance that you will land on a higher number or lower number depending on how you were holding it when you dropped it. But if you actually like roll them, there's no real statistical significant difference.
Nice. So I've got here in my hand a giant foam squeezy ball D20. As you can see, Zach is seeing this right now. It's for when you crit fail and you really just gotta like let out a bunch of rage. It is a spin down, so I'll have to make sure that I roll it properly. So long story short, use whatever you want. But back to the card. It has pay 4 mana, generic, sacrifice treasure chest, roll a d20. So then it has these kind of outcome determinations based on what you roll. So if you roll a 1, it says trapped, which is hilarious. You lose 3 life. So that's the equivalent of the critical fail. If you roll a d20, you just get super screwed. You roll a 1. In D&D, from what I know, something bad happens. So if you try to roll to slice a dragon's neck off, and you roll a 1, you'll instead trip over a rock and impale yourself or something like that, right?
Yeah, it depends on the DM. Some DMs are more lenient with natural ones than others are. Some DMs will make you roll a natural 1 when you're rolling an attack roll, you break your weapon, and now for the rest of the fight you've got to figure out how to fight without a weapon. The baseline though is that in D&D, almost in every situation, a natural 1 is an auto fail for whatever it is you're trying to do. So that's kind of leveraged here. And then the next few steps, you've got from 2 to 9, you create 5 treasure tokens. So, that's something. From a 10 to 19, you gain 3 life and draw 3 cards. And then on a natural 20, and this is the opposite effect in D&D of a natural 1. A natural 20 is an auto success, and depending on what you're actually trying to do, may have some other benefits associated with it. On a 20 for treasure chest, you search your library for a card, any card. If it's an artifact card, you may put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put that card into your hand, then shuffle. That's wild. That's pretty good.
Yeah. So 2 through 9, you really don't want, right? It's kind of like a mana doubler. This would let you, I guess, have one turn of Fires of Invention-esque gameplay where you just get to play 2 things, 2 4-drops or something like that if it's the next following turn, or play something else that very turn that you did it. But gaining 3 life and drawing 3 cards, that's more your value, but then you're not getting any mana back from it. I don't know, this will probably be fine. And then if you happen to hit a 20, I guess you get the tutor. In limited, you kind of almost would rather hit 10 to 19 than the tutor, though. I mean, unless they're printing an Inkwell Leviathan of some sort in this set. I haven't seen any artifacts that I want to sneak in, though. But
the flavor there is the treasure chest has some cool new weapon in it. From a D&D perspective, you're I upgraded my armor, or I upgraded my weapon, or something.
The one you wanted.
Right. Yeah, and that's cool. I think you're right from a D&D from a limited perspective. You're probably going to generally want to draw those cards.
Yeah.
But there's something to be said here. This is a 3 mana card that does nothing until you pay 4 more mana.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm first picking this one. A little loose.
Yeah,
Last but not least, I wanted to mention Eliwick Tumblestrom. Now, this is not a D&D character from what I'm aware of, but she's very clearly a bard. I mean, all the art we've seen with her on it so far is just hilarious to look at. From what I'm getting, she's this happy-go-lucky minstrel of some sort with a frog companion that sits on her shoulder, and she seems to inspire the local woodland creatures to do some kind of jamboree. I don't know. I love it. Whatever's happening here, it's great. So she's 2 green for a 4 loyalty legendary planeswalker type Eliwick. Her +1 is venture into the dungeon, which, enters the first room or advances to the next room. More on that in our set breakdown, but just having that alone as a repeatable venture effect is really versatile for the first activation, and then seems to be able to power you pretty quickly through the rest of the dungeons. Her -2, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand. If it's legendary, you gain 3 life. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. All right, she can make friends. Pretty cool. Her -7 is you get an emblem with creatures you control have trample and haste, and get +2/+2 for each differently named dungeon you've completed. Huh.
Weird.
Yeah. Trample and haste, we've seen something like that before. It's kind of like a little Akroma's Memorial type thing. Yeah, so that alone is pretty good. Yeah, very green planeswalker. But then getting +2/+2 for each differently named dungeon you completed. I mean, I assume by the time you ultimate her, you've probably made it through a dungeon. She's not the only thing venturing. There's other cards in the set that venture. So, I don't know, you ultimate. Even if you take her up to 8 and then ult and you get that emblem and then you start taking her up again, then you can I guess, complete the one dungeon if you hadn't finished it, and then that emblem would then give all the things +2/+2, and then you can keep venturing with her. I don't know. This seems pretty cool. I'm interested to see where she falls, and I feel like she'll be a pretty solid limited card.
Yeah, I assume that's how that works. That like the emblem will tick up the power and toughness buff if you complete dungeons after the fact. I would hope that it's not like it checks only when this ability resolves, and then that's it for the whole emblem, because that would mean the floor on this ultimate is give your creatures trample and haste, which is fine, but certainly nothing to write home about. But the ceiling on this is trample, haste, and +6/+6. So,
which is absurd, obviously. Last but not least, we wanted to chat a little bit about Modern Horizons 2. We didn't really even put any notes for this. We just had a good time cracking some MH2 packs and wanted to talk about it. So first of all, we had a pretty good box. We couldn't get a draft booster box. Those things are just sold out everywhere. I don't know. We did manage to get set boosters, which I think was our first time really cracking those too much, but I don't know, it paid off. We got quite a few rares, a bunch of cool alt arts, the nice extended borderless ones, some of the retro frames, some sweet foils. What we get, like 6 fetch lands?
Yeah, I think it was 6 fetches. We opened a Ragavan, which was pretty sweet. We opened 2 Grists. One was foil and extended art. There were a handful of other things, but those were kind of the money cards we opened. We did make the value of the box back, which felt great. And then we basically, what we did a super sealed of sorts, where Ben and I, so a box has 36 packs, right? And we cracked, I want to say it was 2 sealed pulls each plus a pack or something like that.
Well, hold on. We started with 1 sealed pool, and already it's off. It's a little loose because the packs are kind of seeded.
Right.
So
Yes.
a pack will tend to have like a bunch of blue-black cards in it, and then a blue-black uncommon. So we had to account for that. But we figured, hey, maybe let's just try it, see what happens. So we each cracked 6 packs, and then we were like, we don't know what we're building. You want to crack 6 more?
Yeah, because both of us
add them.
Both of us looked at our pools and were like, do we even have a deck here? Like can either of us make an actual Magic the Gathering deck with the cards that we opened? And we both looked at each other and kind of shrugged and were like, want to open another pool?
So we had the super pool of 12 packs each, and that kind of negated the whole seeded aspect of it. By that point, we had enough stuff, we were able to make some pretty sweet things. And I think our decks were pretty sick. I played Jund Storm, and it performed almost exactly as I expected it to. When it worked, it was freaking fantastic. Something like the best I probably had was like 30 power on turn 6 or something. I made a bunch of 4/4 beasts, and Suspend really helped. Yeah,
there was one game where I think you went turn 1 or 2 Soul Talisman, and then turn 3 or 4 you played like 4 spells into a Chatterstorm, and it was like, okay, all right, this is a thing. And it was hilarious but while we were opening packs, I think I opened one of the other Storm cards that was kind of garbage, one of the other green garbage Storm cards, and I was like, why'd they even put Storm in this set? And Ben's over there like secretly trying to put together this like this Storm deck, and it actually worked pretty well. I played a Shenanigans Grixis list that played, it was just tokens. Like it wanted food, it wanted treasures, it wanted squirrels, it wanted crabs.
Wait, Sultai, right?
Sorry, yes, what did I say? Grixis?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Sultai.
No red Sultai, yeah.
Yeah.
But back to it. It was sweet. It was the sweet deck.
The first game we played was hilarious because Ben was like trying to sort of get off the ground and do his thing, and I was just like tokens and tokens and tokens and tokens. And he was like,
Junk Crawlers? Was that the card?
It was Junk Winder, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, Junk Winder, which taps down creatures anytime a token enters the battlefield. And then I had one of the cards that when you cast something for mana value 4 or greater, it makes tokens. I had the Simic artifact that gives all your tokens flying. I also had a Glimmer Baron?
Yeah, oh my god. Glimmer Baron absolutely wrecked my game plan game 1. I was hoping to like make a bunch of stuff, attack in. I had a bunch of squirrel tokens, and he just has this 1/2, but like 3 clues, 2 treasures,
a couple of squirrels,
a handful, some squirrels, and I'm like, that thing is functionally an 8/9 or bigger.
Yeah, I think at one point I got it up to like a 12/12 function, like an effective 12/12.
Yeah, so I couldn't attack even with my like 2/2s and 4/4s and whatnot. I just got destroyed by that little Atog type thing, and it was pretty impressive. So tokens definitely earned its spot in MH2.
Well, that does it for us this week. Thanks so much for listening and walking through sort of how we approach a new set. Hopefully you got some entertainment out of our discourse on MH2 and D&D as Magic set. If you're interested in talking more about those things, definitely check out the Discord, where we have a ton of channels and people have been going off. As Ben mentioned, our D&D spoilers channel is kind of firing on all cylinders, so definitely check that out if you're interested in talking spoilers or getting tips for the upcoming format as it comes out. Also, stay tuned for our set breakdown or format breakdown episode, which will be coming soon as well. And if you want to support the show directly, the best place to do that is on Patreon. You can check that out at patreon.com/draftchaffpod. We'll be updating that in the next week or so definitely keep an eye out on that if you've been on the fence with the Patreon. Really appreciate all you who have been supporting us financially there. It's amazing. We still are baffled that people continue to support us that way. If you want to reach out to us outside of the Discord, you can do so on Twitter. You can find me at Rannick Galfridian, Ben at BetaFish1, and the podcast directly at DraftChaffPod. You can also email us at draftchaffpod@gmail.com. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you next week. Enjoy spoiler season.
Later. So real quick before we go, I wanted to chat about what's been on TV recently. Because now that I have free time again, I've been getting caught up on all the things that I haven't gotten to catch up on in a while. So first off, have you seen Bo Burnham's Inside yet?
I have not. I have heard very good things, but I have not seen it.
Oh boy. It is a time and a half. I was never like the biggest Bo Burnham fan. I'd seen like little clips and things from, I'd never seen one of his full specials before, but I had been told many times, similar to you, that it was fantastic. Eventually, one of my good friends came over to my apartment, sat me down, and was like, all right, we're watching it right now. And I was like, okay, I guess we are. It was her third time seeing it. And she was still just as excited to watch it. And I was like, okay, it's got to be good. And somehow, despite all the hype, it was exactly as good as people had told me. Bo really crushed this one. It's kind of a masterpiece. I don't think I've seen anything like it. If you want something that perfectly captures the zeitgeist of right now, just what everybody's feeling post-COVID, / readjusting to the new world, / global warming, / capitalism has kind of screwed us for good. It doesn't offer too many solutions, so it can be a little depressing to watch, but it does really capture what people are thinking. Highly recommend. Extremely well made. But now there's a few other things too. Bad Batch.
Yes. Apologies because I sort of spoiled. Also, we're going to try to avoid spoilers here, so I don't know if we need a spoiler warning, but maybe spoiler warning. We're talking about a show, and if you are worried that we're going to spoil something, maybe stop listening. I sort of spoiled something for you accidentally, Ben. Sorry about that. Hopefully that wasn't, I don't think it was the biggest spoiler in the world, and it didn't give you too much info, but sorry about that.
Yeah, it's fine. We've spoiler alerted enough, so spoiler alert one more time. Cad Bane is back. It was pretty cool. I could have predicted this, though. Like, right. Bad Batch has kind of been Dave Filoni jumping around the universe, seeing how people are doing. Cad Bane, he's still there, still bounty hunting,
still awesome. His old tricks.
Still awesome. He actually beat Hunter in a duel. That was sick. I didn't think
without
they'd do it.
Much effort either. He's just like, you're done.
I thought it was gonna be like a fight. I thought it wasn't just gonna be a duel, but
he wrecked that guy. So good.
Western. Dave Filoni knows how to make a good Western moment. That's for sure. But I don't think there's been one. That was the most recent one, right?
Most recent episode? I thought there was one this week. Or actually, I guess it hasn't. I don't know. I think I missed last week's as well. There should be one on Friday. So I'm not positive, but maybe I'll watch it after we're done here.
Yeah, I'll probably do the same. Anyway, that has been pretty good. I thought the first episode was the strongest, the kind of mini movie. And I think everything else since then has been a little closer to like average Clone Wars levels of goodness. Yeah. Still pretty great, but nothing quite as gripping as the very first one. Now that we're starting to get back into the main story instead of the kind of island hopping, jumping around, checking in with people, I think we're starting to get back into the good stuff. Everything with Crosshair is pretty great.
Apparently, we're getting a mid-season finale, so to speak, where they're doing like kind of a movie type thing for, I think it's episode 11.
Nice.
Which is supposed to be pretty phenomenal. So hopefully that stands up to that. The other thing, I don't know if you caught it, but those two girls that they ran into, like the mining chicks, were Ahsoka's friends from the end of from the last season of Clone Wars.
Right. To be honest, they weren't my favorite in Clone Wars. I forgot their names. They were a little annoying, and they were kind of padding before the absolutely insanely good last arc of Clone Wars. So once that last arc came up, I kind of wiped everything with them from my head. But it was a cute throwback. And last but not least, speaking of Disney, look, Disney's not my favorite company, but they can make some pretty entertaining content. Loki. So what have you seen?
The first episode and very, very little of the second. So I'm quite a bit behind. I saw a poster spoiled of the main villain, so to speak. So I do know the cat is out of the bag for me on what her deal is. But yeah. So I will say I did really like the first episode. I thought it kind of got back to some of what I liked about WandaVision, in that they're trying some wacky new stuff. We get to see a cool character that we like a lot, that I think, as much as I did like the show, Falcon and the Winter Soldier just didn't strike. That was just very straightforward MCU buddy cop Captain America movie. Whereas this feels like, oh, we're going to get some nice new like teases at random stuff that's going on in the MCU, and we're going to see some pretty fun things happening. So
yeah, I kind of agree with Falcon Winter Soldier. It was just all right, entertaining enough to watch. It's like, whatever. WandaVision, I think, well, it definitely was my favorite. I think the first episode of Loki was my least favorite so far. If I wanted to watch the original Avengers movie, I would have just watched the original Avengers movie. I didn't need them to show me the same clips from it that I remember. I've seen it before. They could have just put a thing at the beginning that says, go rewatch Avengers, then watch this, and they could have saved like 30 minutes of runtime.
It wasn't the first Avengers movie that they were recapping, though. It was Endgame.
Okay, they did some Endgame, but they also did, like, they showed the scene from the first Avengers movie, and they did the cardinal sin of recaps in media, which I cannot stand, when they show a clip from a movie in universe, like with like the camera angles and the shots. It breaks everything. I cannot stand it. So
with,
like
the interrogation scene where he was like,
or when when the Avengers are all poised above Loki on the top of Stark Tower, and that they have like the reverse shot where he's like, I'll take that drink now. Yeah. And it's like, oh my God, just show it from his perspective the whole time. You didn't have to switch back to the overhead shot, like looking down at Loki. He doesn't remember it from the Avenger. He doesn't remember it from Hawkeye's perspective. Yeah. He remembers from it. They could have just freeze the screen on that and said, this is what it was his perspective when he said, I'll take that drink now. But it was so obviously just like a file that they had uploaded. And that ruins things for me. I cannot stand it when a show does that. But anyway, forgetting all that, episode 2 was much better. And I really liked where it went. Episode 3 was awesome. Okay. I was like, oh my God, this is so much fun. Like, I am totally hooked at this point. I'm sold. You got me, Disney. I'm in. So that's what I got. You should catch up, because we got to talk about this thing.
Will do. I've got a 3-day weekend coming up. I definitely will do that.
Nice.